Welcome to Talking About Our Generation, a new online music show where we're going to interview some wonderful musicians and people from rock's illustrious past. My name is Gary McVeigh-Kay. I'm a journalist, sometimes school teacher, but most of all a massive music fan. And I'm hoping that over the next few episodes we're going to delve into rock's glorious past and ask some insightful and interesting questions of some brilliant people who we've got lined up as guests for you. I'll hand over to my co-presenter now.
Well, thank you very much, Gary. My name's Simon Warner. I've been a music journalist. I was a live reviewer for The Guardian in the 1990s. I taught popular music at Leeds University for more than 20 years. And I've also published quite a number of books about the US beat writers and their influence on Anglo-American rock culture. But I am, like Gary, a fan of this music. I'm a fan of this stuff, and I'm really looking forward to engaging with him and also our guests on a regular basis.
Well, it's great to speak to you, Simon. Obviously, in our remote locations. So how's lockdown been for you over the last few weeks then?
Well, I mean, lockdown has been quite a test, I think, for us, our families, our partners, our friends. I mean, in some ways, it's been an opportunity to read books, listen to music, catch up with Netflix, all those sorts of things. I'm very glad to say that we haven't been affected in any direct way by this terrible pandemic. But massive sympathies for anyone who has. But for me, it's been like being in a bit of a 5-star prison. All the media facilities I want, and no reason to do anything else. No cafes or bars or cinemas or theatres to go to. How's it been affecting you, Gary?
It's not been too bad. What I was going to ask whether you've had this shared experience. I've suddenly found out that massive pile of books that's been piled up next to my bed for the last 5 years has very quickly started to go down as I've had time to read things.
That has happened to me too. I've been reading, books as it happens on the counterculture. I've read a couple of Julian Barnes. I'm currently reading a fantastic novel by a German writer called Volker Kutscher, who wrote Babylon Berlin, the TV series, which has also hooked me. It's like a noir 1920s Weimar Republic thriller with a Sopranos feel. So I've seen the TV show, and now I've been reading the books.
Well, I think it's time to introduce our guest now for our first segment. So the guest on our first show is a brilliant singer-songwriter, musician, producer. He's worked with everybody from Eddie Reader to K.D. Lang. He was the frontman of the 80s indie band The Bible, and an all-round good egg. So we're going to, by the magic of technology, in a second, we're going to have Boo Hewerdine. So welcome, Boo Hewerdine, to the show. First question, Boo, how's lockdown been for you?
Well, it's probably the same as it has been for everybody else. It's been kind of strange because I'm a touring musician. Over the first 2 or 3 days, I saw an entire year's worth of gigging disappear. But things have been sort of amazingly busy and interesting. I've been working on lots of projects with other people, other musicians in their homes. I've been mentoring people, which is something I've done for quite a long time. And I love doing that. I've had some amazing adventures working with people and seeing them flourish, and writing with other people, starting my own record, working with Brooks Williams from State of the Union. So actually, I don't think I've ever been quite as busy. It used to be really easy doing a gig. You just sit on a train for a bit, because I toured on the train. You turn up, you pretend to sound check, and then do a gig, But now they expect you to work all day. I didn't like it.
And do you miss your audiences, Boo?
Oh, I probably miss them more than they miss me. Yes, of course I do. I have done a couple of online gigs. I'm doing a charity gig tonight for refugees in Glasgow, and it's sort of a little bit odd doing a gig and no clapping at the end of it. But I've got used to it now. I did one for the Green Note about a week ago, and I really enjoyed it. And they got a great format, and there were 3 of us, so we were chatting with each other, and it felt nice. But yes, you do miss it. Yeah. I mean, Brooks, who I was working with this morning, he does hundreds of gigs, and it's like a pain. Around 9 o'clock, you should be showing off in front of people. But No one in this flat's interested. So.
We're interested, but
Huh?
we're here.
Joking, of course they are. But no, I don't do full gigs, so I can't really charge my family bill money, can I? Would you like me to sign it? No, you're all right.
Do you give refunds?
Mostly, yeah.
Yes, music. We've been consuming it in all sorts of ways for many decades. I think I'm a little bit older than Boo, and Boo's a little bit older than Gary, but we're all broadly of similar generations.
Yeah.
But I was remembering a time. I mean, when I go back to my very earliest days of buying music, I think it was 1963. I was probably 6 years of age, and I had to at that stage wear specs, and I still do, as you see. I had to wear specs, and my dear departed mother very kindly said to me, as you've been so good about the spec wearing thing, we're all wearing specs, aren't we? Yeah. As you've been so good about the specs wearing thing, we'd like to buy you a gift. And she asked me what I'd like. And I said, could I have a record? And we went into a Cheshire record store, South Manchester. And you might remember this, Boo. I don't think Gary does. But my mother and I stepped into a listening booth. Do you remember listening
I
booth?
know what they are, but I think I missed out on the era of the listening booth. There might have been one in a jazz shop that I used to go to in London when they kept it there for nostalgic reasons, you know.
They were still around when you were checking out the music. But we stood in the booth. We listened to She Loves You by the Beatles.
Yeah.
Followed by Not Fade Away by the Rolling Stones.
Yeah.
And I, as a 6-year-old music fan to be, I guess, was persuaded by my mother to buy She Loves You. And so for 6 and 8 pence, probably doesn't mean anything to you or Gary, but for
No, of course it does. Yeah, that would be 6 and 8 pence would be 35.5 pence, I think.
That's extremely close, isn't it? Yeah, 35.5 pence. And from there on, I was just hooked on this thing. And for the next 50 odd years, I've been doing it. But what was your first musical consumption, Boo? Where did you get it? Where did you buy it?
I got it. I think I probably started a bit later than you. In fact, the first single I bought, and I only remembered this the other day, and I bought it because I liked the tune. Ridiculous. Was Blue Is the Colour by Chelsea. What a terrible first single. Absolutely terrible.
Is that because you were a Chelsea fan?
No, not at all. I thought, oh, that's a nice tune. I didn't know they were a football team. I just thought they were a very large group. So I got that, and then amazingly, there's a man called Rob Peters that I work with now. He's a drummer guy, and his cousin wrote that. So we talk about that quite often. So actually, I bought that, and then I thought, I'm not sure records are really for me, and I left it for a while. And then the first album I bought, and I still love this album, is Ian Hunter's first solo album, which is called Ian Hunter.
Yes.
And I thought it was a fantastic record. My friend John Kelly, producer John Kelly, that was his first job. He was the T-boy on that record, so I like that. And then the second record I bought was Sgt. Pepper's by the Beatles. And I thought, God, blimey, albums are good, aren't they? They're really good. And then it's been a very long, slow, disappointing road since then.
And what did you play them on?
My dad had a fancy hi-fi. My dad had a fancy hi-fi, so I didn't have really a record player. I had a little dance set thing that somebody gave me when I was young, and they gave me. I remember we had 8 singles, and one of them was "What Do You Want to Make Those Eyes at Me For," and another was "I Remember You" by Frank Ifield. And I thought, I don't really like records. Obviously, they're all right. And so I played them on there, and then of course the fateful Christmas where my sister bought me. On gold vinyl, New Boots and Panties by Ian Dury, and I had a room full of elderly aunts, and I played that track. You know the one I mean, don't you? Blaring out of my dad's 4-foot speakers.
Would you say that those coloured vinyl records, didn't they wear out more quickly? I had a.
I think that one wore out very quickly because I think it was taken away from me by angry parents. Yeah, I'm sure they did. They were rubbish. And then I worked in a record shop later, and picture discs were terrible. After about 3 plays, the whole thing would collapse.
Yeah.
I do remember though. This is like I had a manager, and we got. Do you remember the Beatles re-released all their singles on picture disc?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
we got one of them. I can't remember which one. Would say it's From Me to You or something like that. And the B side wasn't the correct song. It was they'd put Silver Machine by Hawkwind on it, right? So I said, "Do you think you should keep that? That might be valuable one day." He said, "No, I'm sending it back to EMI." I mean, can you imagine? I could just the three of us could have lived and several generations off that mispress there. Of course, I love the Beatles. I absolutely love the Beatles. My favourite group ever. And I'm very jealous of anyone who had your experience of buying those records when they were current. And I loved a lot of the people that I work with. I have either worked with the Beatles or know fantastic Beatles stories, and I can never ever get tired. Did you ever read that book, that really thick book called All Those Years Ago? I think it was called, which is just the first of a trilogy of.
Oh, it's the Mark Lewison
amazing.
book, yeah.
So I just got the basic one. There's another one which is like 100 quid, which is 3,000 pages instead of 1,000. And I remember reading that, and I loved every page. And they talked about how when Rory Storm and the Hurricanes were playing at Butlins, one night an elephant escaped and fell in the swimming pool and drowned. And then it said in brackets the elephant was called Elsie. And I remember thinking, crikey, if this is the level of detail in the abridged version, what's it going to be like?
He's an astonishing scholar, Mark.
I love that first book. It's so brilliant because it's the thing where they had to sort of go across Liverpool in a bus because there was someone on the other side of the city who knew how to play a B7, things like that. They're beautiful stories,
And Gary, let's not leave you out. What was your first record and where did you buy it?
Well, first record I bought, and this is why I'm interested in this subject, because I teach young people as part of my job, and I try to explain to them what the record buying experience was. So I remember jumping on a bus after school, going into town to mix music, handing over, I think it was 49p, and buying a Town Called Malice by The Jam, getting on the bus to go home, taking it out of its sleeve, putting it on the record player, listening to it, then listening to it again. And it was, for me, it was that physical experience of listening to music, which, wonderful as the little box in the corner called Alexa is, it's just not the same without putting something from a cardboard sleeve onto a turntable. And it's that physical engagement, really, I think, of records. And I mean, do you listen to much vinyl these days, Boo?
I must confess, I don't even have a CD player. I'm appalled at myself for the. I've come from a family where the people have wonderful hi-fis, but sometimes when you make music, you don't. I've got thousands of things on my computer and stuff, but I really rarely listen to other people's music. I'm making it all the time, but I think I'm missing out, because when I do go and, like, say, my brother-in-law's got a fantastic rig and he plays. Oh, I don't know. Last time we were there, I think he played. What's it called? Miles Davis. The
Kind of Blue.
That Kind of Blue, of course. My goodness, it sounded astonishing, and so I know I'm missing out.
But now you see, we walk around with 60,000 tracks on something that size. And
yeah, well,
the whole experience has changed.
You don't even need that anymore. Yeah. It's all streaming away, which is completely knackered my, me and my pals. It's completely knackered our but it's nice to see that the man who invented Spotify, he's got $2.5 billion, isn't he? Of ours. That's nice.
Has he? That's nice. Somebody's working with that a bit.
I mean, it shows how old I am when I say to both of you that I'm faintly disgusted that I can just go onto my computer and find any Boo Hewerdine track I want.
Yeah.
Having had the original Bible album, 35 years ago, got rid of all my vinyl 5 years ago. That was among the collection. But I actually value music to such an extent where I want to put a value on it. I want to actually give people like you, music makers, a reward, and it just doesn't seem to be a fair system anymore.
It isn't, but it's very interesting in that the idea of music being worth something is a relatively new thing, and it's come and it's going. I mean, your old wandering minstrel never got any PRS. So we're just having to rethink about how we all my friends who do this, we absolutely love doing this and feel it's such a privilege. So if you want to keep doing it, we're going to have to be duck and dive a bit and think of different ways of making it work. And that's been a bit of an adventure, to be honest. I'm a bit of an optimist, you know, and that's kind of the way I've always been, because like you say, that first Bible album, that was made, I worked in a warehouse for a year to afford it. No one was interested. I made it and suddenly everyone was interested. I've always been a bit like that. It's like, if it's hard, I just go, all right, what do I do now? So yes, it is. It's annoying, but you can't change it. So
and one day soon, we're all going to have chips implanted into us where we can just access music like that whenever we want, anyway. So.
Well, and what a glorious day that will be.
It will. It will. So, as we've already seen, our guest today is Boo Hewerdine, brilliant songwriter of the 80s band The Bible, and now famed in his own right as a songwriter, producer, and a maker of music for himself and others. And we're going to chat now to Boo about his career, really. So, Boo, we talked earlier in the show about your sort of consumption of music as a young person. But there was obviously a point where you stopped being just a fan of music and dipped your toe into the actual writing process. So talk us through how that came about.
Well, I remember being 7 or 8 and thinking I want to be a songwriter. I remember that. I really distinctly remember that. I didn't have the wherewithal, and I didn't learn the guitar until even after I'd started writing songs. But I kind of knew that's what I wanted to do. I sort of think in the songs, so eventually that was what I was going to do. But I worked I was saying, in the record shop and the record warehouses, and we made. I was in a school band, and then I was in a band. I was thinking about this the other day, and we made a really, really good tape, and we were called Placebo Thing. That's a good name, isn't it? And I sent out some cassettes, and I got a call from some record companies, and one of them was Virgin. I think I was 19 or something, and they said, "Will you come down and meet us?" And I said, yeah. So I had no way of getting down. I was completely broken. So my friend offered to drive me down on his motorbike, and we just got on the motorway, and the engine fell out of his motorbike. So we had to abandon it. So I sort of rescheduled it, and they said, no, we really want to hear you. So that was great. So I went down to, when it was in Vernon Yard, and I remember Paulie Yates was in reception, and the big bald bloke out of Gillen was walking out holding copies of his new record, and I thought, oh, this looks really good. And I went into the meeting, and the guy said, "You're really, really good." I don't know who it was. I've no idea who it was. It's so long ago. And he said, "Yeah, we'd like to sign you." I said, "Oh, fantastic." And I just went home, and I didn't know what happened next. We didn't have a manager. I didn't know anything. I don't think he even had a sort of proper way of staying in touch with me or anything. So it was only years later I realised that I probably would be, as famous as a famous person if that had happened. So after that, I started a new band, which was a band called The Great Divide, and they signed to Ensign Records, which was part of Island, and we made some very, very we weren't very successful at all, but it was very interesting in that the man who A&R'd us was a man called Nigel Grange, who he's a really great man, and he's always in my head whenever I'm making records. I don't know if you've just seen that Boomtown Rats thing.
Yeah, I watched it the other night. Yeah.
Yeah, if you look, the last thing it says is dedicated to Nigel Grange, and to people who, he died a couple of years ago. The people who know him, he was an incredible person because he was interested in people that no one else was interested in. Like no one was interested in Boomtown Rats. No one was interested in Sinead O'Connor. They were on that label. No one was interested in Mike Scott, the Waterboys, that was on that label. It's a brilliant environment to be in. As it happened, we didn't quite have the wherewithal to do it, and we broke up. And then I started The Bible, which is sort of the one that was the first one that did okay. And we made a record that I saved up for a year, working in a warehouse, and made a record in a studio near Cambridge called Spaceville, but also a really tiny studio in Islington called Red Shop Recorders. So that was an amazing adventure, because especially once The Bible started, all these doors immediately opened, and we had a wonderful manager. We were really, really lucky. We were approached by this sports master in Harlow who said he wanted to manage us. And we were also approached by some really big management. And this guy, like Miles Copeland's lot and all that. But this guy said he wanted to come and see us rehearse. And our keyboard player had a dog, and he offered to walk the dog. So that's why we gave him the gig. So he was our manager, and that was Marcus Russell, who then went on to manage Oasis. And we were so lucky because he was the most straight-ahead, honest, brilliant guy. So we were very, very lucky to have him looking after us. And I know people often say, "Oh, you weren't very successful, were you?" But for us, we're working in warehouses and stuff. It felt great, and I put a lot of it down to him. You know, the level that we got to.
I want to ask you, Boo, about when you've had your songs covered by other people. I mean, you've already partially answered this, but is there ever a sort of sense that you don't want to relinquish control of a song, or are you quite happy to give stuff away in inverted commas?
To me, one of the massive thrills of writing songs is what people do with them, because you can't unwrite a song. I mean, a good example would be "My Way" by Frank Sinatra and by Sid Vicious. It's the same song. You can't unwrite a song. So if somebody does something in a very different arrangement to the one I've written it in or I've recorded it in, it's exciting to me, because it never stops being the song that you've written. And there are a few songs I've written that have been recorded by, I don't know, 10 or 12 people, and they're all very different versions. It's exciting. I'm never going to say to someone, "Oh yeah, no, I'm not sure about that." It's not part of the joy of it for me.
Have you ever heard a version where you feel as if the artist has missed the point, or just not?
Yes, once.
Are you able to reveal that to us?
I'm not sure I can. It was a woman. I'm not sure I can remember her name. And she's a very, very nice woman. It was a song that was, I thought, quite a tender song, and it was recorded in quite an aggressive way, and I just didn't think it quite worked. But I didn't say no, because it's interpretation, isn't it? But I would say every other time I've been delighted. Probably the most delighted I've ever been was when Chris Drever recorded a song of mine called "Harvest Gypsies," and I was so gobsmacked by how great his version was. I remember we were on tour and playing it over and over again, and being really moved by his take on it, and it was nothing like my take at all. So it's cool, you know.
I was wondering whether for you songwriting was is it a technical craft where you try and make something that's going to be, to use that terribly old phrase, a hit, or do you want to write a song that strikes a chord with you? What are you trying to do?
Well, at this stage, it's trying to write a hit. I mean, occasionally that will sort of bubble up into my consciousness, or like the thing I've been talking about, the mix I've heard. I think it will. I think it will be within its, and that's exciting. But with my own work, for a long time, it's more to do with a sort of connection and somebody somewhere maybe hearing it and feeling what I felt. And but I think sometimes people say, "Oh, he's a craftsman and stuff." I mean, I do know all that stuff, but I share it as well with workshops. But for me, just being good at your gig means you can get to the sort of nub of something quicker than if you're going, "Oh, does it go like this? Does it go like that? Should this bit go there?" If you get sort of really sort of train yourself in that stuff, then it becomes it becomes much more of an emotional experience rather than a technical one. Which is why I like to read about the craft and I like to share it, but not because I'm sort of pedantic. It's so it becomes less important in the process, just because it's something you're good at, like being a trained athlete or something, you know.
I remember as a young journalist writing favourably about Graceland, back in the late.
Oh, thank you.
And I also remember that decade of great songwriters like Costello and Joe Jackson and Paddy McAloon and Gary Clark of Danny Wilson and so on.
A really good friend of mine, Gary, yeah.
Is he? I love Danny Wilson. But when I returned to listen to Graceland again in the last few days, I was hearing, was there some sort of C86 influence on that? Was there some kind of jangling, shambling influence on that record?
We're a very interesting band because possibly, but the other partner in the band was very much a really a real musician's musician, and I think that was why it sounded unusual. So yeah, there was a little bit of that, but it was all very, very pure music. I can't think of a better way of putting it. It sounds, but yeah, I love indie. I love punk, and Tony came from a completely different place. Although he played keyboards in the Bible, he was actually a very well-known jazz drummer. So it's the mixture of the two, and the clash. Actually, we would argue quite a lot, which is where, if there was anything special or different about us, that's where it came from.
Now, in the introduction, I should have been able to introduce you as Boo Hewerdine, Ivor Novello award winner, of which you came very close to with Patience of Angels. But there's a bit of a story behind the fact that you it was Schrodinger's award, wasn't it? Because you won it and didn't win it all at the same time.
I mean, yes.
Can you talk us through that?
In the press release, it said that I'd won it. And I found out that I had got the most votes, but there was a little backstage coup, and they gave it to the people who wrote Think Twice by Celine Dion instead. So it's really odd. So I'm sitting in there with my young daughter, and they said, and the winner, and people have been coming up to me and congratulating me because there was a press release outside in the foyer, and they'd seen it and bringing me champagne, and then I didn't win it.
But morally, you did.
I suppose this is a funny story, really. I like it. It's a funny story. And then I was a judge the following year, so I found out that it was something. Yeah, that's how I found out the story, because people told me the following year.
And let's be honest, you didn't miss out because, it's like Celine Dion. Whatever happened to her? I mean, nobody said of her.
Well, I know. I last time I played Royston Folk Club, I noticed she wasn't on the notice board, so she disappeared.
So one of the things that we are keen to talk about in this series of podcasts is songwriters and their songs. Yeah. And fantastic having Boo Hewerdine here, because we're going to talk about a recent song of his called Silhouette. And he's going to tell us in a moment what this song is perhaps about or how it came about. But it's a fascinating piece, this, because it strikes me, it feels like a song that could be a pre-pop era ballad. It feels like it could have come before the Beatles. And as I listen to the wonderful production on it, it's very stripped back with, I think, a clarinet and some sort of music box sound on it. Yeah. It's very enticing. I was also thinking, though, Boo, that although obviously you present the song in your particular way, it's a kind of song that could be sung by a Tom Waits, isn't it? It's got that sort of atmosphere to it.
Yeah, it could be, yeah.
He could bring his gruff tones to the song and give it real.
I tried to be gruff, Simon. I really did.
Tell us a little bit about this. It's a sort of little song in that it's quite understated, the production.
Okay, there's quite a lot to talk about. There's first of all, yes, you're right. That era of songwriting, I love delving into that on occasions, and I find it very stimulating and moving. I like this lyrical conceits and thoughts that you can carry through in a whole song that doesn't happen with more sort of loose modern writing. I really like the chordal movement. I like melody. I think there's a different type of writing, but every now and then I want to do that, and I want to just write a song that does those things. But the thing I feel with my writing that you said, oh, someone else could do it. I really like writing songs that maybe someone else could sing. There's something about that rather than I write a lot with Chris Difford, who's wonderful. I love Chris, and we've done, well, I think we're on our fourth thing together, and I speak to him all the time, and he's one of my heroes. But they're very idiosyncratic, his songs, and they don't tend to be sung by other people. I'm very interested in songs being not to do with me, but just going out there and living. And in terms of the sound, for the last record, I've got a guy that I work with called Chris Pepper, and we started collecting old instruments And the instrument that you hear that you said like a music box is called a dulcitone, which used to be built in Glasgow 100 years ago, which is like a keyboard, but instead of strings, you hit tuning forks. And it was used for church services in flats and in tenements, so that people could play quietly and sing quietly and not disturb people.
Wow.
I absolutely love it. We've got two at the studio, and another friend's got another one as well, which is amazing because there's probably only 100 ever made. And I did some recording with it because I was so excited with it, and then it grew into the last record. And then all the clarinet stuff, all the extra arrangement stuff, is a friend of mine called Gustaf Lundgren, who comes from Denmark. Well, he comes from Sweden, but he lives in Denmark, and I've been working with him for 20 years now, and he's a genius. He's actually a genius. I feel so lucky to have met him. So I can say this is the atmosphere that I want, and he'll do it for me. And I wanted to make something very sparse and felt like just pure song rather than production. So, and as far as what's the song about, I just tried to imagine a song that was written in 1940 that might have been in a musical or something.
Yes, I mean it's the sort of song that could turn up in a period movie, isn't it? From the late 1940s.
But what I try to do is not write in pastiche. I don't really like to do that. So I still applying some things to it that hopefully steer it away from pastiche. And this is not probably very interesting, but I managed for the bridge. I'm in E, and I managed to the bridge jumps up to F, and then through a long, complicated set of chords, I managed to work my way back to E, and I was very proud of that.
Those sorts of chordal shifts are very interesting on the ear. And when I called it a small song, I was thinking of it being a kind of miniature. It's got that.
Yes, I know. I took that as yes, like yes, totally a vignette. Totally. I'm very interested in the small song. I think there's a place for I Will Always Love You and so forth. But some of the songs that have moved me the most, and I like Tom Waits' song, I'm Still Here. I find unbearably moving, and it's about a minute long, and I think it's the most masterful, wonderful song.
I know it's like the serendipity of the time, but I've been listening to it a lot when I've been going out for my daily exercise, my daily walk, because I go on a 3-mile walk and every day, and I've had it on my headphones, and it's and just at this time, I don't know, it's just it kind of fits the mood of this time really, and I found it a very kind of personally a very soothing record to listen to.
Oh, well, thank you very much. Did you? It didn't make you give up hope and just not come back? You
not at all. No.
See if this sounds right. When the time hangs so heavy, goes by so slow, but the days they are gone. Before you know, after all you have seen, you've nothing to show, then you're a silhouette. When you just can't remember who you should be, when all that you are is a faint memory, when shadows are your only company, then you're a silhouette. Once the world was made of color, a kaleidoscope of light. Now those colors all are running, and everything is black and white. If you're a slave to circumstance, a lonely wallflower, when it's time to dance, when you know in your heart you're the ghost of a chance, then you're a silhouette. you're a silhouette.
All I can say is thank you for your time today. It's been brilliant to have you as a guest. And all the best for the rest of the lockdown. And we look forward to seeing you on trains and back in venues again soon.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
Thank you.
Bye, Simon. Thank you.